We're just talking about lots of customers, and I know we're being very flippant about talking about big customers potentially having things over all these kind of clouds, but your typical customers that you are referencing, how many different environments are they actually using? Are they generally all VMware, maybe playing with a bit of OpenStack, or are they all something else?
So they don't have stuff running all these different clouds. I should be clear about that. So when I showed that first thing with the stars, what's in the roadmap, the reason why we're working on these things is because they're not there yet.
Possibilities.
Yeah, they're looking to build an architecture that supports that. But they're just early days in saying, I'm going to start now seamlessly. So the way we see it is that if you have the ability to scientifically decide where things run across your VMware and your OpenStack and these other environments, it's just an extra hop then to be able to make decisions for off-prem technologies, but they're not doing it yet. We see very few people actually, bursting is I think a very much a future case for most people. They're not. Well,
bursting. It takes a very advanced company to have that level of automation that they could seamlessly deploy a workload to VMware or OpenStack or AWS based on a policy engine. I see containerization can surely help with that in the future, but nowadays it's unlikely that people have that flexibility.
Yeah, no, so I think it's early days there. That's why I say when we talk to these customers, we say, where exactly are you in that? Because you're talking hybrid this and that, but the reality is there's a lot of OpenStack out there. We see not a lot of production, but it's it's not a big footprint yet, but it's growing. And there's a whole lot of VMware and other things out there.
But I can definitely see in the future, probably even now, a big enterprise, a massive question for them is, with all this disparate hybrid and hybrid clouds, a mix of public and different private clouds, where do I start? Where do I even deploy things? And rather than some engineer thinking, I think best placed is AWS for this, you can have a cost model based on this that you can show the financial people and the technical people going, that's best.
Yeah, I was on a panel one time and somebody says, do you think that kind of app can run in a public cloud? And I said, think is the wrong word. It's not an opinion. Facts will tell you whether it can or not. If you model, it's either going to do it or not. It's going to meet your compliance rules, and it's not going to be perfectly expensive for data or whatever. You can figure this out scientifically. It shouldn't be an opinion anymore. So we like to be able to codify that. And again, for those use cases that you're mentioning, we just want to stay ahead of that curve because it's where it's coming, and people want to build a greenfield architecture that will allow them to do that. I don't see a lot of that happening just yet.
So I think the cloud option is a very good question, and talking about kind of what the customers are asking for today. One of the asterisks was containers in general. On-prem, off-prem, doesn't matter. What's your experience with customers asking for that level of capability, even saying, you know what, we're brownfield, and we have the debate, do we add 8 more VM hosts, or do we add 8 Docker hosts and build this application on Docker? That's a question. Is that a question being asked today, or are people very static and saying, you know what, this is how we build applications today, and we'll continue that route until these other models mature?
So we had this exact discussion, or a very similar discussion, at our last customer advisory thing to figure out where everybody was with that. And what we were hearing was that, and I think what came out of it was a kind of a better understanding for me anyway, that if you talk about Docker versus LXC. One is a decision that an infrastructure group would make to replace the hypervisor with containers, like LXC. Docker wasn't coming out, and that wasn't happening yet. Nobody was saying, okay, we're replacing that with that. Everybody's still trying to get KVM and OpenStack, things like that working, but I think that will come shortly after that. But Docker was coming up, but not because the infrastructure teams were making decisions, because the app dev groups were throwing Docker containers over, saying, run this for me. And it more of as a delivery container. So that's happening, and that's fine. So what we're watching closely is that where's the point where you start to replace the hypervisor with it, as opposed to just run it, kind of cradle it, as I think some people call it. So that's the thing there. We don't see a lot of people replacing them yet, which I think will come though with OpenStack. If you can just flip the switch and say go to into containers instead of a hypervisor. But Docker is coming faster. But we don't see a lot of people kind of just stacking the Docker on bare metal. It's kind of still running inside a hypervisor.
So some very basic questions for you then. Do you run your software on premises or in a cloud, and if whichever version you use, if it's on premises, what are your requirements, for example, to monitor 1,000 VMs in terms of storage, in terms of compute, in terms of networking?
So I'll give you a high-level answer. We can probably follow up with more detail because we have extensive documentation on it. It runs on-prem.
Okay.
It can run off-prem, but data is always a problem. So we don't typically do that. We're working on some solutions in that area. It's highly scalable, so it runs SQL Server, Oracle as the database.
Yep.
There will be we call a master server. There's collectors you can run in geos. There's proxies for protocol translation through firewall. There's all kinds of scalability components, and it scales very high. So our biggest customer is running on just under 140,000 systems. They had several Cirba servers. Now they've merged into one. So there's one master with I think 6 analysis servers hanging off it.
Okay. So the master basically then had the shared database on your SQL backend essentially, and it has your slaves over here.
Exactly.
And how do you provide availability if your master fails? Does a slave take over automatically?
Yeah, there is a way. Now, again, there's all kinds of details there that because we work through this as far as we do want there to be clustering on the database level for that kind of thing. But yes, there is an architecture you can set up. As you are plumbed in as the online product that is then fielding API requests where to put stuff, you don't want to be down ever. Right?
Yeah,
so that's
absolutely,
exactly. So that's all exactly what's happening in several of our customers right now, where they're making it much more resilient in that regard. So, but I won't get into all the details there. But it's fairly straightforward sizing. It can run inside a VM. The demo I'm going to do is completely on this with the SQL Express database. But for large installations, it does scale very nicely. And it's got it has the ability to dispatch analysis job and stuff like that. So you can make it do a lot of work.
And are you doing all of your number crunching in memory or on disk? How does that work?
Well, it's a JPPF grid of JVMs that are doing it, not completely in memory, but where possible we do that. So.
And do you have any kind of architecture that says that if I'm monitoring a VM, that's one IO? If I'm monitoring 10 VMs, I require 10 IOPS, for example. Do you have any
sizing guidelines for
Yes.
our product? Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we have tiered sizing for all the components of it, and extensive. I have other presentations that go through the topologies for small, medium, and large customers.
Okay.
What that looks like. So we can certainly follow up on that.
Sorry, can I ask just a company question? I appreciate you CTO, not CEO, but Cirba's been around for a number of years. You've taken in sort of 38 million, I think it is, in funding.
Yep.
What's the sort of bigger plan? I mean, you're a company targeting big other companies. Obviously, your investors are wanting money out of it. Can you tell us anything about the future plans from a business point of view, acquisition or?
Well, I don't want to be too
public
specific. I think with investors, there's probably certain expectations at some point. Nobody's in any hurry. We are growing quite nicely, and we're signing up new customers. We just had a great quarter, so we are seeing very, very much. We see a lot of opportunity in this space, and we see the market kind of coming into where we are, and so we're seeing acceleration. There's our direct and our indirect, and we're seeing, of course, both are climbing, but the indirect is really kind of quite exciting right now because I think there's a general recognition that this is a big problem that people want to solve, and so we're finding that we've evangelized less now, and we kind of people say, yeah, I need that, or I have an architecture diagram with that missing. So that's translating into faster sales cycles and interesting opportunities. So we're not in any hurry. We see kind of we see as a bright future here. So
do you think in a way the industry is catching up to what you've been doing for a number of years, and this is the right time? Because over the past 9 years, you've obviously been doing placement and analytics and all that kind of thing, but more for on-premises kind of things with big applications. But now, as the world starts to, I suppose, diversify on the kind of infrastructure they're running, that maybe the world's caught up with Cirba, and Cirba can now offer all that placement decisions, which they didn't often need to consider before.
That's the way I see it. That's definitely the way I see it. That, again, back to that slide where you have more and more diverse infrastructure and more diverse types of demands, and it's just becoming too complicated to do without analytics. So whereas, in the past you might say, you can, again, evangelize someone saying you really should be paying attention to this. I think now people, they come to us, they need that. So we see that more and more now.
And just one question on the business thing. You recently announced that VMware's ex-CTO Ben Fati has joined the board. Yep. Just quickly, how did that sort of come about, and what's sort of his involvement and?
Well, so I mean, it's, as I mentioned, and I'll talk a bit about some of the stuff we're doing with VMware. We have a good relationship with VMware, and we are very complimentary with that, even though if you read the two websites, you'll see placement or something that looks conflicting. And I think it was part of the discussions we were having with them around integration and stuff like that. He got to know our product, and he saw the synergies there. And when he was no longer at VMware, we thought, our CEO approached him and said, what do you think? And he was, obviously interested. So I think it's a great sign because I can spend 10 PowerPoint slides telling you how we work very nicely with VMware's products, but that kind of says it all right there. He knows everything about both. So yeah, we're very excited about that. He's a great guy, very smart. So
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
On more technical.
Sorry about that.
How do you do updates? Old-fashioned way of half-year big update, or maybe a new way of granularly with smaller updates?
So we are agile internally. So we actually follow an agile process, but we find we can't push updates too much to our customers because they can't absorb them. They might have process around adopting a new request. So we have to do it as a limit in some ways. So we have to strike that balance. If we go too fast, they get angry because, again, they might have to put it through pre-prod. If it's running in production, it might be a lot of work for them to adopt the next version. So we do have an agile process, and we do make fairly frequent updates, but we also batch them up, so we know that these big customers aren't going to update as frequently as we provide. So. And
because you combine with a lot of products, how is your dependency on their updates?
Yeah, so there's several key ones that we do. We track, and in our minor release cycles, that's where we manage those things. So they don't tend to come out on quite high frequency, but things like VMware integrations or IBM ICO, stuff like that is a little slower in the agile process, but so we keep up to date. We just released EMC SRM integration. That was on a minor cycle, so it just feeds more data into us from physical storage.
But when I manage your infrastructure, would I then have to check every compatibility list over and over again and search for the details, like I have to be compatible with 1.1.0, or is it quite easy? Are you sort of independent on whether VMware has new updates or no?
So I mean, we tend to, I guess we're fortunate in that we don't tend to have to make product changes on every rev to these technologies, but we do have to validate ourselves. So we will validate it, and we communicate that we are now this version to this version. But they usually don't require any difference in our. I can't think of a case where it's required a different build of our product to support.
So it could, for example, be running vCenter 5, 5.1, 5.5, 6, probably.
I don't know the exact numbers, but yes, we have a very clear range that we support.
Okay.
I have a question in relation to how do you take into account the effort for a business to, say, change a virtual machine from running on premises on one vSphere cluster to moving it across to another vSphere cluster? Because that will entail change control, virtual machine downtime, basically, and the effort to migrate between vCenters. So how does your engine quantify that versus the slight gain you might get in terms of making that cluster slightly more efficient?
So generally, there's a boundary. You'll see it in our consoles. There's a boundary where we will optimize within a motioning boundary, and that could be a cluster, or in some of our customers, it's a VLAN where there's low friction of move, and then you kind of jump to the routing where there's more of a high friction, where we assume that that's not an automated thing. We don't quantify how hard that is. That's saying that that's an easier transition than that. That could be modeled into the thing, but we don't have anything built in like that today. There is cost modeling. There is all kinds of fit for purpose modeling.
Add some feedback to you. I'd say it's quite important because a lot of businesses, their change control can be quite an effort just to fill out the forms in the first place.
Right.
How much time it takes them for the board to go together and go for that particular period of time, how many people are on the board, what's the cost of them doing it.
Right.
So some feedback would be that there's a cost there in making that change that should be accounted for versus the savings they're going to gain from making the change in the first place.
That's interesting, like an activation energy to get to that.
Yeah.
And we talk about various prioritization, but not quantified. We do cost modeling of the actual infrastructure, but not of the activation to get to it, which is a very interesting point. Yeah, it's a better ranking.
And then a follow-on question to that, I can imagine your tool making a recommendation that based on some of the things that you're saying, the company going, yeah, we're not going to do that, right?
Yep.
So the question is, do you then keep saying, hey, you should move this thing. Hey, you should know you move this thing, so that they keep having to go, yeah, we're not going to do that, or can they go?
Well, that's the purpose of the policy, is to say they just say no, that's not an option, and that answer doesn't come out again. So that's kind of the.
No, but so it came. So can you delete it and?
Well, again, we're talking about multiple levels here. At the kind of the granular VM level, yes, and you can make exceptions and kind of suppress things that you don't want to do, or you can modify the policy. Stop telling me to move that with that. If you put in the reason why, then it won't happen again.
And decisions that are presented to me, can I see why this decision has been made?
Yeah, and you can see the impact analysis of the action to fix it as well. And that's again a big thing of ours. Again, I'll show you sometime later on some curves of exactly that, where we're saying this is why it's saying X.
So that would help me fine-tune the policies.
Yeah, that's exactly what that process was.